Today we're talking to Fran McInerney, who was previously a caregiver for her dad, John, who was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. John unfortunately passed away in August of 2021, and since then, Fran has gotten involved in the advocacy arm of the Alzheimer's Association, become a coordinator for the Walk to End Alzheimer's. She's established herself as a patient health advocate, and today we're talking about her caregiving experience, the cost of caregiving, and what she's been up to since.
Well, I am Fran. I am from New Jersey, and I was one of the primary caregivers for my dad, John, who had early onset Alzheimer's. I always say early onset Alzheimer's because he was very young. He was 58 at the time that he was diagnosed. And from what his doctors told us, actually, it was probably in development like much earlier. So very much on the younger side. A lot of time, Alzheimer's dementia patients are like thought of as just like older people, 70, 80 plus. And here he is relatively young for someone to have this disease. I took care of him for probably like very in-depth for probably about 2 years, a little bit by proxy for a couple years because I was in grad school at the time. I cared for him through most of the pandemic, which was an experience unto itself, a bit of a blessing, a bit of a struggle. But of course, I wouldn't change that for the world.
You mentioned you were in grad school for a little bit before you started caring for your dad in a more full-time capacity. Who was caring for him sort of in that interim period?
My mom.
Okay.
But also during that interim period, I guess you could say his independence was relatively okay. I mean, at that point, he couldn't drive anymore, but with me not being there and then it just really being mostly my mom, she felt very comfortable like going to work, him being able to stay at home, things like that. So safety wasn't an issue at that time. Of course, that increases as the disease progresses, safety awareness and that being a major issue. So really when it became the two of us, really tag teaming, it was very intense.
Yeah, I believe it. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what it was like caregiving during the pandemic and like the challenges of the pandemic?
Okay, so big challenge was working from home. As someone who works, I'm a speech therapist, I work in a school. And so to switch to totally online, which is like learning a new skill unto itself, and then being home for that time was just good because then, you get like a first eye view. You really get to see what's going on with my dad and how all of this is impacting him. But at the same time, you're also like, oh, wow, it becomes so much more real because you're in it every day. About, I would say, maybe 6 to 9 months, the summer before. We'll go with the summer before. My mom and I have been discussing like what was going on with my dad, where he was at. There was always a check-in, no matter when I was living at home or if I was at school or anything. There was always check-ins, kind of like status updates. And we were talking about the fact that coming winter, he probably wasn't going to be able to remain home safely if she went out to work. So what were we going to do about that? And he wasn't at the point where he was going to need like a medical care at home or like an aide at home or anything like that. He wasn't quite there. So we needed something that was kind of in between. And fortunately, we found the Tender, which is an Alzheimer's respite program, which was like 2 towns away. And we were able to send him, I think it started from like 8 to 1 or 8 to 2. And it was just enough time for him to go. And everyone there had Alzheimer's. So everyone there kind of understood where everyone's at. It was very nice social community space. Their model of care was wonderful. And the bonus was that they always served lunch. So we didn't have to worry about like a meal, which is also huge. Like when you go through the planning process of the day and who needs what and at what time and things like that, to have like one meal checked off is huge. So he started going there in the summer. It carried through to that fall. And then of course, when COVID hit, like everything shut down. So that unfortunately was not something that he could do anymore. So then from there, we transitioned into being at home full time and just really being there with each other all the time, which was great because it was kind of like found time. You know what I mean? Something that maybe I wouldn't have had the opportunity to spend that time with my dad, but at the same time, it was all the time, which could be incredibly overwhelming after a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a lot of time with any but person,
Yes.
and now you're caring for someone, and of course that's special, but also I imagine is overwhelming. Did you find ways to like get a break or take care of yourself? What was working when you guys were just like in that, like we all were in the house all the
So
time?
intense. So fortunately, for a very short amount of time, I would say about 3 months, my two siblings were there. And so that was very helpful in terms of like, okay, like let's go for a walk. Let's just take a drive in the car. You kind of alternate. We can all trade off on like meal making, things like that. So that was really helpful. My sister lives in Berlin, so she did eventually have to go back. So she went back, and then my brother, he moved out. So then after that, it was really just my mom and I. So having like an extra set of hands, having the support of others during that period, that like very crunch time period during the pandemic, was incredibly helpful. And then even beyond, just having the support of others in the ways that they could figure out how to be assistants for you was huge.
Yeah, I know I'm throwing questions at you that we didn't talk about previously, but
That's okay.
what kind of things were they able to do, after they've like gone back to Berlin and moved out? How were they able to support from afar? What things were useful to you?
So I love my sister, but her like weekly check-ins, just doing this right now, being on like Google Meets or Zoom, being able to just kind of be a different face and checking in and kind of updating. I think that was very exciting for my dad. She sings at the Dome in Berlin, so sometimes their services would be online, and sometimes she just have some solos, which is great. But then, be like, okay, Dad, look, there's Sarah. This is required. This is what she's doing, and it would just be like excitement, and it would just the minute, 20 minutes, half hour of like that type of distraction was also like, okay, I'm gonna run and like grab a cup of tea or something. Like that's huge, and it was just like brought him joy, which is great. And then my brother could come in at least more than once a week, but like would have like, this is your meal this week. And he would come in and cook dinner, which would be a break for me or a break for my mom, depending on our work schedules. And once again, that little break is huge. It's just one less thing on your mind. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome that they could find ways, or there was like touch points that were nice for your dad, but also a break for you.
Yes.
Your dad has since passed. Can you talk a little bit about what life's been like since he's been gone?
Yes. It has been, and I say this now because it's been about 1.5 years. Had you talked to me a year before or a month, and by a year before, I mean this time last year or a month after, I would probably have a very different response or may not be quite as calm as I am right now. But I would say since my dad died, there's been a lot of kind of reprogramming, trying to refigure out who I am now that I've had this very big experience, very life-altering experience for not just myself, but of course him. So trying to refigure out who I am, what I want to do, how I'm going to channel all of my feelings and emotions from that experience into something. So it's a lot of refiguring that out. Like I remember, there was this like week of, oh my gosh, okay. This is a whole separate story, but there was a week of time from when we put my dad into the memory care facility, and at the time that within a week's time, we brought him home on hospice. So it was very quick. That I wound up going with my boyfriend, his family, down to the beach, and I just like read for 3 days, and it was amazing. It was like, right, I like reading. Oh my God, great. Like because you forget about it. You're like, I can't dedicate like time to like 2 chapters in a book, or if I have the time, I'm exhausted. Maybe I just want to veg out on the like sofa or something. So like, trying to remember the things that I liked before and kind of getting back into the group of doing them too. So a lot of, getting out of that caregiver mode of like, I need to be on, I need to be doing something, and I need to be figuring something out, to like, okay, take a breath. Like, yes, we have things to do, but, you don't have to be on edge all the time, which is huge.
Yeah, my mom passed. It's been 8 years now, but I remember sort of similar to you just said, like, in the year after versus now, I would have had different answers, but it was confusing to, like, maybe not confusing, but it was an interesting experience to sort of reconfigure like our family dynamics and who I was, and how we sort of operate now, because there had been this sort of focal point in the family, and now everything was different. It was very like nice but weird experience to come back to things like, oh, I like reading,
Yes.
Thank you for sharing about, how things have been different in the past year and a half. I know also you've gotten, more involved in community work related to Alzheimer's and dementia. Can you talk a little bit about, what you've been doing and what's exciting to you?
Yes. So while my dad was still alive, I wound up getting involved with the Walk to End Alzheimer's, specifically the Philadelphia Walk to End Alzheimer's, because even though we are from South Jersey, we are very much Philly folks and Philly fans, which is really great. A little side story. My boyfriend is from the North Jersey area, so when it comes to hockey or football, there's a little bit of a rivalry there. So I got involved with the Philadelphia Walk to End Alzheimer's because I was like, I feel like I need to do something, channel this energy, this frustration, this many emotions, whatever was kind of going on. But like, what can I do right now? Because I can't do anything like super big, right? Like we still have our dad here. He's the priority at this point, but I need to do something else. And this was a really nice way to get involved. I also happen to know the person who was managing at the time. She had been my college roommate. So I reached out to her. I was like, hey, how can I get involved? What can I do? Like, I don't just want to join a team. I'll create a team. We can all walk together, but like maybe just getting involved a little bit more. And so I wound up on the planning committee, and I've been doing that for the past, I guess going into this will be the 4th year, because walk season ends in like November. So we're going into the 4th year. And then after my dad died, I remember like really sitting down and having a conversation with my mom being like, this is nuts. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, how are we going to change this? Like, this is what happened to our dad. And there's so many other people who know somebody else. Like, how are we changing? Like, what are we going to do? So, there is like a legislative branch of the Alzheimer's Association. I'll just go with that. And it is the Alzheimer's Impact Movement. So once again, I reached back out to Holly. I was like, who do you know? And she said, here, I'll send you in this direction. And I wound up meeting some people at the walk who then I got like, sorry. So it's a long story. And let me, what are all the steps? Who wound up helping me meet up with the right people to get involved with Alzheimer's Impact Movement. So, I mean, I can keep going with it, but just
I mean, we'd love to hear more. That's so serendipitous that your college roommate was involved there, and has been able to like connect you with all these things, because there's no way you would have known in college that this would be a connection that would be useful or meaningful. No. I mean, we'd love to hear more about just sort of how you've gotten involved in all of these, and if you're comfortable, like the work that the organizations are doing, and ways other people can get involved.
Sure. So specifically, I'm from District 3. It's very, what was that? Not Hunger Games. Yeah. Was it the Hunger Games? I'm from District 3 in New Jersey. No, but I work with Congressman Andy Kim's office. And we just check in with him, let him know what kind of legislation is coming through, whether it be for caregiver support, patient support, funding for research, which is obviously so crucial as this is just like a terminal disease. And, we have a couple of meetings with them once a year to check in, let them know things that are coming down the pipeline, or request that maybe they take a look at this, maybe sign on to it, or this coming March, we'll all go down to DC, and everyone from all of the states kinds to go down. It's called the Hill Day, and everyone goes and meets with their members of Congress or their state senators, and just has a little chat and a check-in and like a refresher of like, hi, we're still here. Alzheimer's is still a thing. Here's the legislation that we can sign off on to make the world a little bit of a better place,
Yeah, I love that. I love that you and your mom were like, we need to get involved. We need to do something. And now this is like a very tangible output of that.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the legislation or research that is coming down the pipeline that, you might want to talk about on Hill Day or is just sort of on your radar in general?
Yes. So one of my favorite pieces of legislation this past year was the ENACT Act, and it is all about equity in neuroscience research and the need to go into every community and have all members participate in research. So we were lucky living near Philadelphia, like just across the bridge. There's various hospitals, universities, teaching facilities, research centers, things like that. So my dad could very easily participate in research, which he did while he was still alive. And even afterwards, because we donated his brain. So keep it going. But that's not always possible for people. We're very lucky, once again, being so close in proximity, my mom being a nurse, having flexibility with her job to take him back and forth, having a car, all of these things. So this piece of legislation was really looking at how can we reach communities that aren't necessarily being able, have the access to participate, which is great because, one medication or one treatment might not work for everybody. And we really do, of course, want this to work for everybody because this is just like a horrible thing. And the other thing that is very exciting is all the lecanemab research that's coming out. And the fact that the FDA recently approved it. This is for individuals who are in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and this drug kind of slows down the progression of the disease. So while it's not a cure, it is definitely, just giving someone a little bit more time. I believe there's a couple other things coming down the pipeline, but not at liberty to say right now. But there really is. There's like other things coming down the pipeline, and this is a really great first step in a direction towards a more effective treatment or cure, no matter what state you're in terms of the disease.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Like it is very exciting. You can tell that, your eyes light up, that it's meaningful to a lot of people and families, especially this medication. Yeah.
Because, right, like, you get a diagnosis and you're just like, well, best of luck. You know what I mean? There are some drugs out there that will slow things down a little bit, but they're not stopping anything. So you're just getting a death sentence, basically, a long-term progressive death sentence. And it's awful. Like there's just no hope. And so to have, funding go towards research and then to see something fruitful come from it is really great for anyone who has this disease or just looking towards the future.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was going to say. Like even this medication in and of itself is very exciting and hopeful for people. And a reminder that like the funding going towards this research isn't for nothing. Like there is, there's potential for more here, which is exciting.
Right. Honestly, I don't have the facts and stats in front of me, but I think, is it by 2050 that Alzheimer's specifically or dementias in general could like bankrupt Medicare just with the aging population. So we kind of need something.
Yeah, that's an alarming statistic. Yeah,
it is. And like, ooh, like that's actually going to be like me at that point. And like, oh my God, I don't have any children, but what if I do? Like, what is that falling? Like, what's falling to them? Like let's look for the, unfortunately, not so distant future.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a scary statistic. I actually don't know that I knew that. And I'm glad that you shared it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to real quick on that. I was talking to my uncle. He teaches a nursing class and he was like, hey, do you have any like videos on, Alzheimer's that you think I could kind of incorporate into my lesson? Just because PowerPoints are awesome, but so is video, And so I was bringing up a couple of things and I found this one video and I realized it's from like 10 years ago. And unfortunately, like nothing has really changed there except for the number of people impacted. I think it was like 5 million in this video. And now it's up to 6 million, 10, like, oh my gosh, these numbers just keep climbing. And I was like, this is like a 10-year difference. Oh my gosh, an extra million people. Oh no.
Yeah, that's not great. Yeah, those compounding numbers. Yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing about what you're excited about, and what, is coming. Is there anything else, I guess, I'd love to talk about, the financial side of caregiving. That was sort of our like aim in this podcast.
Yes.
Is just for like uncover, these hidden costs of caregiving. But before we jump into that, I just want to, make sure that we've like covered the work that you're doing. And also if people want to get involved in, the walk or in the Alzheimer's Association, like any of these things, where can they start?
Well, one, reach out to me, because if you live in New Jersey, I might know a guy. No, but start at the Alzheimer's Association in general, and you'll be able to Google look up walks near you, find out who to reach out to in terms of the Alzheimer's impact movement. I mean, and then just you as an individual can always just reach out to your congressperson or whoever, and they can kind of guide you if you need like financial assistance, medical assistance, things like that. And chances are, the woman who I am in contact with in this office, if you reached out to somebody there, like they've probably heard of us at some point, because it's a very large and loud group of people.
That's good. We need that. I would love to talk about sort of your experience when you were caregiving, many things, but specifically about, finances. And if you're comfortable, I'd love for you to share a little bit about how caregiving and the cost of caregiving impacted your thoughts around like spending and saving and just future thinking.
Okay. That's like a
small question.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's think, how do we want to start? So I would say the first piece of advice that we were given when my dad was told this diagnosis was about the 5-year look back. Are you familiar with this at all? Yes. Okay.
And if people want more, we've got a blog post about it.
Okay, great. Honestly, that was like the biggest thing. They were like, get him off of anything that could potentially be an asset. Because when you go to look for long-term care, they're going to be looking back at anything and everything financially that could be related to you. So that was probably the best piece of advice that was given to us. Unfortunately, with this disease, like, you could have 10 okay years and then you have to go, receive long-term care. You could have 3 years and then maybe you suddenly need long-term care. And that 3 years doesn't necessarily fall into that like 5-year look back period. So do that immediately. Get off the assets.
Yeah. Anything else? Like when you first started caregiving, you got this piece of advice. Was there anything else that really influenced like how you got care for your dad or how you thought about spending money?
Yes. Okay. So caring for him during the pandemic, financially, we were okay. And I say this in that I was able to work from home. And so where my dad was at in terms of the disease meant that he needed someone to be with him, but he didn't need intensive medical care during the day. So we didn't need to hire anyone else. I could stay home with him. And then my mom, being a nurse, she was able to work her schedule so that she would also be home specific days during the week. The weekend was kind of like other people could come over and help out, so that wasn't, the priority, but we were really lucky in that we were able to delay some of the bigger financial costs. In terms of saving and spending, I think, can you really? Because it's hard, because what I think you don't realize until afterwards, until you're really in it, is that there are all of these very little costs along the way that add up over time, right? So you might be getting new kinds of clothes. You might be switching from regular pants to some type of adaptive clothing, like adaptive pant or shirt. And those are not $5, at Target. They're going to be a little bit more expensive because of the type of clothing that it is. If you need certain types of hygiene products, toileting products, those suddenly are an added cost. And I don't know, we didn't know how to save on it. But the best thing that happened to us was that we had family members who said, okay, we will be at one point, we will be buying this for you the supplies for this each month. We will be providing this for you for this each month. So some of the costs were kind of split up, but we never asked people. That was the kindness of others coming and offering to help us. So saving, man, like saving was just, we got lucky with being able to, work through, and I'm not saying that didn't take a toll on us mentally or physically or emotionally, but financially we were able to save during the pandemic because we weren't really going anywhere. I was able to work from home. My mom was able to manipulate her schedule. So we did kind of get lucky there, actually.
Yeah, I don't think you have to grimace. I mean, everyone's situation is so different, and ways that you were blessed, other people are not, and ways that other people are blessed, you are not. Like it's
I think it's just like the guilt of knowing, how intense caregiving can be, and to feel fortunate because that that's not the case for others, and just how like, oh my gosh, how are you doing this? How are you handling this? And just wanting, honestly, like, it almost be like, I wish I could help you because I know that it can be so intense. Like, oh yes.
Yeah. I mean, it is intense. As a quick plug for Giver, something that we're working on, and it's young right now, but we're working on a marketplace for people to save on the cost of caregiving products and services, and put them all in one place, products that are vetted, and then we're negotiating like the best possible discounts that we can get for people. Again, it's really young right now, but we hope that can be a place that people can come and, and save on some of these caregiving expenses. Like the little things like new clothes or, different toiletries, like, the stuff that adds up over time. You mentioned that people were generous and, chipped in and brought things over and bought these things for you, and that you guys didn't ask for this help. I guess looking back, is that something that, like how would you have done that differently? Would you have asked for that help, or is there other things you would have asked for? This is sort of a vague question. I'm just curious about what that experience is like.
I don't know. I think once you get into the mentality of like, I'm just being this like strong person that I'm going to figure it out and do it, and no one else is going to have this burden on them, I don't know that we would have asked. Or if anything, it wouldn't have been for physical things. It would have been like, hi, we need help, can you come over and stay? Or, how could you come over and maybe give us a little bit of time to go to the food store or something? Like, I don't think we would ever send someone to go to the food store and be like, but it probably would have come from somebody else. Like, how can I help you? And then be like, okay, here is a list of stuff, but also here's my credit card, because I'm not going to like force you to buy us groceries, even though thank you for taking the time. So it's one less thing that I have to do. Like, I'm not going to, No, I don't think we would have asked for it. No.
Are there any ways that people offered help that was like easier for you to accept that help, like questions they asked or ways they showed up for you?
Yes. Okay. So my grandma was still alive at the time. And so it was very easy for when she like, oh, let John come over and stay for like a day or two, to be like, yes, absolutely. Because, this is your son and we want the two of you to have time together. So anytime that she would offer for him to go and stay, even if it was just overnight, one, it was good for them for that time. But then also for us, it was just like, cool, I don't have to worry about any like getting up at a certain time, making sure like I'm up, getting breakfast or figuring out dinner or whatever. So it kind of would work out both ways.
Yeah. I mean, I found sort of the same when someone says, let me know how I can help. That's like, well, I don't know. I can think of a million ways. I'm not going to ask you. But if someone's like, I'm bringing over dinner, and maybe that's a bit invasive, but just doing always felt more useful than like putting the work back on me.
Yeah, I remember because then at some point, like them coming over to help, like doesn't help. So yeah, it does, you want the other person to take the initiative, even though I think they don't want to step on your toes and then take the initiative. So for anyone out there who wants to help a caregiver, I will tell you, find a way to give them back some time or to just make their day easier. Meals, great. Have someone come over and clean their house. Awesome. find, offer to come and take your loved one for a drive. Of course, if they're not comfortable, going in the car, that's a whole other thing, but find a way to give them back just like a little bit of time so they can breathe and maybe reorganize their thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. PSA to people that might want to
Yes.
help a caregiver.
Yes.
You mentioned you and your mom were home during the pandemic, which, may have been a blessing or a curse, but it did help you like delay some other sort of major financial decisions. I hope I didn't mishear that, but can you talk a little bit about what some of those more major financial decisions were as the disease progressed?
Yeah, so that would be whether or not to to go from having someone come in part-time for care for my dad to coming in full-time and possibly having like round-the-clock nursing care in whatever capacity that would have been at the time, or placement into a memory care facility. Those were two very big decisions that we were able to put off for a little bit. I did eventually have to go back into work. So we wound up, my mom was still able to kind of manipulate her schedule, or I shouldn't say manipulate, but work her schedule out so that she, would have these very designated days home. And we were able to find our neighbors up the street, their son wanted to go into nursing school, or he was in the process of going to nursing school, something like that. And he actually came down and then would stay with my dad during the day. Once again, like he didn't need that intensive medical care yet, but he did need his meals prepared. He did need to make sure that, he wasn't going to walk out the front door, possibly in the winter without a coat on or anything, or even walk out anytime and just get lost. Make sure he's drinking throughout the day to the best you can to, encourage him to do so, or even just having someone there to talk to or listen to music to, or watch something on TV. Like you need that kind of companion care type of bit. So we had that for a little while. And then what I heard happens, and it did happen, was that there was just this like snap moment where you're like, oh, we can't do this anymore. And this is not, too much. And it really did kind of happen like that. And then we had to suddenly make the decision between 24-hour care or, a live-in facility. And we chose to go with live-in facility.
How did you make that decision? I can't imagine it was an easy one.
Well, the steps in the house, I told my mom, I was like, I can't find him at the bottom of the steps. He's going to fall down. And I think even we would have never been feeling okay, even if there was someone there 24 hours a day, like that. Nope, I couldn't do that. I know I couldn't do that. And then my mom was like, I don't know if I could sleep knowing that there's just someone awake in my house 24/7. So it made more sense to move into the live-in facility.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. If you remember, and if you feel comfortable, can you talk a little bit about the cost of that facility and you and your mom are both still working, so maybe you paid out of pocket, but just like how you managed the cost of a live-in facility?
So, so my dad had a retirement account. So that was what was being pulled for to cover the, initial costs. And that was what was going to be used for however long it could be used while he was living there. Unfortunately, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, he moved in on a Wednesday and he was coming home the following Thursday on hospice. So we did not have a long-term experience with long-term care. So I can't speak too much to the cost for it and managing that or navigating it. I will say my mom and I had a couple discussions. I mean, some things were pulled out of his retirement account ahead of time for other costs. But just given the state of the economy right now versus a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, it's very different. She was like, the way the stock market is, because my dad had a 401k, then versus now, and the losses that have taken. She's like, I don't know actually what would have happened long term if we had to pull from that account, given the state of the economy right now at this time. So we also got a little bit lucky there as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to count your blessings.
I wish I was
Uh,
given better advice. I'm just
no, I think this is
sharing what
useful. Like,
happened.
again, I think, every person's caregiving experience is so different, but I also think there's like a lot of relatability, d- across the board. I think it's useful. I don't think it has to be advice. I think it's just helpful for people to hear, how different people are managing this experience. Um, you mentioned you guys were pulling from your dad's retirement account or accounts, which of course is really lucky. I'm curious about just sort of like your systems for managing money between you and your mom. Did you, use an Excel spreadsheet, or like how are you managing this like on a logistical
Oh,
standpoint?
oh, it was very old school. It was very pen and paper and comparing notes. I'll just like me and Excel, we're not friends, and my mom and Excel have never met. I don't think. So very pen and paper and very checking in with one another. Like we're going to balance the checkbook type of thing. I think it was just kind of like, well, this is just always what happened, and I'm not going to like figure out a new system right now, because if the system isn't broken, I'm not trying to fix it because I've got other things on my mind. If there was something that was like specifically for someone in a long-term care situation that made it easier for people to track their finances and expenses, that would be fantastic. I would totally endorse that. But I was not going to create that system. There was like one of those ottomans that is actually like, it contains the files. We had one of those, and you know where all of the files were and all of the paper goes. Like, I'm not joking. It was very, very paper heavy.
That's good. I mean, if it works, it works.
That's what it was.
That's our hope at Givers. Like, that's what we're on a mission to do, is build financial tools that are, useful and that caregivers actually, want and love to use, and make it easier, like give people back
Yes.
time and energy, so that you're not spending your time digging through papers or like managing a million accounts or whatever. That's what we're on a mission to do here.
Which, yeah, no, that's really good, because I mean, you look on the younger side. I'm going to go with that. You don't
Thank
look
you.
my mom's age. No, but I think finding like better tools, just given how technology is, and people our age and younger just being much more tech savvy than like paper and pencil savvy, like having an app would be amazing, because that's just how we function at this point, right? I mean, I do love my, write down planner, of course, right? It's January. Everyone buys a new planner. But really, like, right, my phone is where everything is and what I'm going to check in on. So to have that available, especially as people our age are now taking on caregiving roles more and more for their parents, they're going to look for things that, like an app or something that's going to help them out.
Totally. And yeah, you're right. There's this millennial section of people, as millennial generation is becoming the bulk of caregivers at this point. And so, I think we will see a shift, hopefully, to products like Givers, away from pen and paper. But again, whatever system works.
Right. Oh my
works.
gosh. Right. If you have a system, like, I do not want to throw a wrench in that. No.
If you could go like back to the beginning, people end up in caregiving roles unexpectedly. What would you have told your previous self, or what do you wish you knew at the beginning of your caregiving journey?
I mean, I guess at the end of the day is that you can do it. You can do it. It's going to be hard, and you are going to cry and get very frustrated and upset, but like, you really can do it. And as corny as it sounds, at the end of the day, it is going to make you a different person. I mean, I can't speak to anyone else. I don't want to say it made me a stronger person, but it did make me a different person. I think it has put me on a different trajectory than what I would have thought, 10 years ago, for sure. I did not think I would ever be in this space. Like, that was definitely not in the plans, but here I am. And hopefully this experience that I had with my dad will be of benefit to someone else. Maybe it'll just make their experience a little bit easier, or maybe, talking to Congressman Kim will influence legislation to make caregiving easier, make various drugs or treatments more accessible to people, or at a lower cost, or I don't know what at this point, but, it will just make you a different person in a good way. Hopefully in a good way.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like, yeah, I think all of life is learning. And so if you can take, I hope it made you different and in a good way.
Yes. Well,
as you
it just
learn.
I mean, yeah, right. As you learn, and hopefully in a good way, because, right, this is like an all-encompassing thing. As I said, kind of before, with like even just the little costs that add up, everything kind of adds up, and so it really does take a mental and physical toll, and for others, a real financial toll on them. So a lot of people wind up in the middle of the group, right? Like,
Sure.
I remember taking a course and we were talking about care, and the woman there, she was talking about, oh yeah, like the people, like, you know, with the Buco Bucks, their facilities, oh my God, beautiful, amazing. The chefs make their favorite meals from their entire life. It's wonderful. And then you go on like the total opposite end of the spectrum. And I've seen facilities like this, and it is awful. And it's, you know, just people are tossed there because they don't have the financial access. They don't have the resources, and it's terrible.
Yeah. And I think there's also a, like an education piece that's missing also about like what kind of financial support is available to people, or, you know, programs, reimbursements that might help them there. Not only is it like access, it's like access to education, which I think is a piece that's also missing, is like, there are programs that can hopefully be helpful to people, but discovering them or qualifying for them, you know, can be hard, and not knowing that they exist.
I would say qualification is absolutely hard. I mean, yeah, as you said, there's definitely state-run programs. You'd have to check with your individual state, but the financial limit is often relatively low. So, you know, a lot of people don't qualify. My dad did not qualify for any of these things. Actually, we talk about advocacy last fall, there was a panel. It was Congressman Kim, Congressman, is it Coleman Watson? And I forget who the other man was. And they were talking about, you know, finances for the state of New Jersey and things like that. And one of the questions that was asked was like, when you fall into this middle income group, right, you know, where is your help? And it wasn't really ever answered because it's just not there. So, the financials. But right, the education of what is available and quite frankly, what is not, and having that information, being able to make smart decisions with that.
Yeah. It's a lot of things you've learned in the past, years.
Yes.
I think this question might be a little bit redundant because you just shared, what you would have said to yourself a couple years ago, but we like to ask everyone to close out these conversations. You know, what's your number one tip for other caregivers, financial or otherwise?
Ooh. Number one tip, I don't know. I think I need like 5.
We can do 5.
No, I'm not going to come up with 5. My number one tip would be, and I know we've talked about this, but look for the people who can help you. And there's people that can help you in different ways. You know, an obvious way someone could help you is like bringing over dinner, as you mentioned, right? Like that's huge. It's wonderful. And that's where people, you know, a lot of people find themselves. But then you might have a friend like or, you know, an aunt as myself, you know, who through their job has learned about the 5-year look back, you know, or maybe something else financially related that they'd be able to help you out with. Or maybe you know someone who is actually really good at fixing toilets or something, you know, and they'll be able to help you out there and maybe knock a few dollars off when you need something fixed. And all of it kind of adds up, and it's helpful in different ways, you know? So accept help, but then also look for people who might be able to help you because it could be unexpected.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of that Mr. Rogers quote that says, look for the helpers. I don't know what the whole quote is. It's about like the world's a disaster, but look for the helpers.
Yeah, but it's true. And
totally,
you need the support around you. And I know what you're talking about. I was like, I don't sound like Mr. Rogers, but it's just so true.
Yeah, I think it's a good quote. I love it.
Yeah.
If people would like to find you online and follow along with, you know, the community work that you're doing, where can they find you?
Oh, you can find me on the good old social media, primarily Instagram and Facebook. My millennial self can't quite grasp TikTok yet. I try so hard. But you can find me at Fran the Millennial Caregiver. All one word.
Awesome. We'll be sure to include your links, wherever on all the different platforms so that people can find you there. Fran, I really appreciate your time and willingness to share so much about what you're working on now, but also your dad's story and your caregiving journey. It's meaningful and I think helpful to a lot of people. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. And I do hope this helps somebody.